What's up, everybody? This is NorbCam coming at you on this Blue Friday. So happy Blue Friday to everybody. Appreciate you guys being here to watch this episode. I'm very excited about this because I have a guest who I haven't spoken to in quite some time. It's been a while, and boy, he's definitely got some insight on the Seahawks. And right now, it's something we could really use because this stuff talking about Russell Wilson, I mean, there is not a single soul in Seattle who doesn't have some kind of freaking out opinion about what's going on with Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. So I'm hoping to settle down some of the noise about that with my special guest, Brandan Schulze from the Seahawks podcast. So I'm going to bring him on in just a moment. But before I do, I just want to remind everybody, if you would do me that favor, please smash that like button, hit the subscribe button as well, and the notification bell. That way you won't miss a single video in the future. So without further ado, I want to bring on my special guest. There he is, Brandan Schulze of the Seahawks podcast. Brandan, good to have you back here, man.
Norb, it is good to be back. I mean, it has been a while. We haven't talked at all since this whole past season, and now here in the off season, I feel like it. The discussion has been a little bit insane. Not something I necessarily would have expected, but maybe something we could have predicted. Who knows?
Well, and so, speaking of insane, I'm so insane that I realized I just said it was Happy Blue Friday. It's not even Friday today. It's Thursday. And the chat was quick to point that out to me. My brain is like all over the place in this week. Yes, Happy Thursday. Happy day before Blue Friday. But you're right, man.
I've already got my Blue Friday gear on. So that way, that's probably what threw you off. You said, Brandon's decked out for Blue Friday. And okay, I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, man, that's my excuse anyway. But before we get into the issues and the topic at hand, I want to make sure you get a chance to talk about your show, about the podcast, and everything else that you have going on. This is a chance I'd love to get more eyes and ears on what you got going on. So please feel free to promote your podcast and anything you got going on right now.
Oh, yeah, definitely keep him busy. Anyone who wants to tune into the Seahawks podcast, Adam and I have that going throughout the off season. Probably a show, 3 times a month or so, and always fun to chat with him. If people don't know, I also podcast as part of Field Goals, fieldgoals.com. And I had an article that I posted here just this week talking a little bit about Russell Wilson's 4 approved trade destinations. So people can check that out. Maybe we'll get into that here as well too, Norb. And one fun thing that I'm doing, I'd like to invite people to, is that every week, kind of here through the next few months or so in the off season, Clinton Bonner and I, who we do 3 in 3 out as part of Field Goals, and we're trying something new. We're doing it live via the Locker Room app. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you can download the Locker Room app. For right now, those are the only platforms that it's on. But download that. You can look for me at Seahawks, and you can tune in to listen to us live and interact with us. It's a lot like what you do, Norb, except people can dial in and raise their hand, and they can come on, and we can all have a fun chat about the Seahawks.
Which is probably would be very therapeutic for a lot of people right now with everything that's going on with the Seahawks. And again, thank you for being on here, man. You mentioned your podcast. You guys are up to 326 episodes now since you started. That is amazing. And you guys do such great work. I love hearing you and Adam. The latest one, as I was prepping for the show, I was listening to your last show talking about this very issue, the Russell Wilson and issue going on with the Seahawks, and was what made me decide I need to call those guys. I need to see if they wanted to go talk on my show, because you guys had so much great stuff to talk about. So we've had the opportunity I've been on your show before, you've been on mine in previous shows, and I'm glad we could do it now because it's a perfect time to do it. So thank you for making the time to be here, man.
Oh, you know me, Norb. Anytime someone wants to talk Seahawks, I'm game. This is for fun. This is, this isn't work or anything. This is, whenever someone calls and wants to talk Seahawks, I'm in.
All right. Well, let's do it, man. So this thing about Russell Wilson, it's on a crazy level now, and those little super chats are going to pop in here. Drive Swizz with the super chat says, Norb, the Hawks are picking up some calls. DEFCON 1, the sky is falling. No, I'm telling you, it's like every single day there's some new wrinkle to the whole thing. First, it's Russell Wilson's not happy. Not happy with the protection. He wants more say in things. And all of a sudden, Oh, well, hold on a second. Now he has 4 cities that his agent says, we're not asking for a trade, but we would like to go to if it happens. Let's look at these 4 cities. And now the Seahawks are supposedly fielding calls from interested cities and teams. Jason E. says, shout out to Brandan and Adam. I've been a freeloader for a year now, but hey, Norb, hope all is well. Thanks, Jason E., one of my NorbFam members. I appreciate you being here, man. So let's get right into it, man. How real is this story? Are we really talking about Russell Wilson not being here in the 2021 season? Or are we talking about something further down the line? Come on, set people straight. People want to know, is this a real deal or is it just a bunch of smoke and mirrors and people panicking? How worried should we be about this story, if it is a story?
I do think that based on what we've heard, we should be a little bit worried, just a little bit, because I think, and one of the things that I like to do is to make sure that I am listening really to Russ's words and not responding and reacting to a lot of the discussion that ends up surrounding the different reports. And so when he went on Dan Patrick, Adam and I talked about his exact quotes, and it made a ton of sense coming out of the Super Bowl and just seeing how kind of upset, that shot of him with Roger Goodell and with Sierra. And, he did look miserable, and he talked about being miserable because he wasn't playing in the game. And he saw Patrick Mahomes playing behind an offensive line. He couldn't, Mahomes, he didn't have hardly any time to throw the ball. He saw Tom Brady winning another Super Bowl behind an offensive line that was extremely competent. So coming out of that game, you could see how, as a quarterback, you see the very different approaches by the teams. Now, with Kansas City, it was injuries for a big reason of why Mahomes was running for his life for such a big part of the game. But it went to show you that if you have protection and a guy like Tom Brady, you can play deep into your career. And so I'm sure he saw that and wanted a lot of that. And that's what he talked about on Dan Patrick. And a lot of people saying out of that interview, he threw his offensive line under the bus. I didn't necessarily see it that way, because he had the opportunity to throw individuals under the bus. He talked about how great Dwayne Brown was. And really, he only spoke to this idea of throughout his career that he's nearly at 400 sacks. And that was something that Dan Patrick brought up.
Yeah.
So it's you can't really argue with that in terms of facts, is that, yes, he's been sacked a lot, and he owned a little bit of it. Maybe he could have owned more of it. But that's really what kicked all of this off. And the reason why I say I think there is a little bit of worry is because we've never seen his agent come out, put his name to 4 specific teams that he would be willing to go to. And so I think that's the part that as soon as I saw the Michael Sean Dugar article out of The Athletic, I think there was, a lot there. He put a lot of the breadcrumbs together for that particular article. We saw some new things in there too. And so that combined with those 4 teams that his agent announced, that's where I think it has to be on Seahawks fans' radar now.
Now, I'm glad you brought up that initial Dan Patrick interview, because that's the spark that lit the whole thing on fire. And I was with you, man, because it seemed like the interpretation of what he said was being a lot more, there was a lot more of a slant on it, that how unhappy he was based on just the analysis of the quotes than what if you actually listened to it, if you actually listened to the interview, because he pressed him hard. It's like Russell wasn't going to give him anything. And Dan Patrick would not take no for an answer. He kept saying, but Russell, do you want to be in on the decisions? You were getting sacked. How many times? Why are you getting sacked so many times?
Yes, I do want to be on the decisions.
Yeah. But it was like he came out and said, man, I'm so unhappy. I really got to say, it was almost like he was backed into a corner. Had to say, okay. Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be great if I could have more control. I think it'd be great. And then, like you said about the whole offensive line thing, the first thing he said after he asked him about the sacks, he said, well, I think his first thing was I could get rid of the ball, something about getting rid of it faster. And then he says, he kind of pivoted and said
that when I do hold on to the ball, I make
great things. Touchdowns happen out of that. And the only thing he said is that, we could be a little bit better up front, and immediately went to change the subject. So I'm with you, man. If only what I've heard out of Russell's mouth, I've never actually heard him sound like he was a bitter, upset guy. So that goes all the way back to the Dan Patrick thing. Since then, I'm again with you that the fact that the agent threw out the whole, we're not asking for a trade, but, and then naming the cities, I was angry that he did that. I'm thinking, what does this accomplish, that they can't take care of? If there's really just an issue behind closed doors, what does that do by now naming all these cities, besides getting all those fan bases and teams into a frenzy and getting the Seahawks spammed with calls? What now is the point of that? Does that now make it feel like, okay, the fact that he's naming cities, maybe there's more to this than just over analyzing quotes? But I guess that's the next direction I want to take this to. You set it up, but now I'm going to be Dan Patrick to you, man. So, should we be worried as Seahawks fans, as Russell Wilson fans, those of us who want him to stay, how worried should we be that this might be a real thing?
I feel like in those 4 names, it was more of a message than it was actual teams that we can expect him to go toward, because the weird thing is, and this is why I did an article for it up at fieldgoals.com, is that there's 4 teams that are listed. Well, why those 4 in particular? And I've seen, former GMs look at it and really break it down as far as why he'd like to go to those few cities. But again, if you go back to his words, in that if he wants competent offensive line play, then, Dallas, they spend a lot of money on the offensive line. New Orleans has a good offensive line, but Chicago, they don't have a good offensive line. Jermaine Ifedi's there, and we know how that worked out for Seattle. So
right.
And the Raiders, Tom Cable's down there with the Raiders. We know how that worked out for Seattle. So, and even if you look at the rankings and how those break out, it's not good for Las Vegas or Chicago. So those teams are curious. And then, so why would he not go to some other teams that would make a lot of sense? We've heard in the past around the contract negotiations, Russell Wilson would love to go to New York because it's a big entertainment mecca, and Sierra would love to be there too. But if you look at New York, and a team like the Jets makes a ton of sense, but they have a defensive coordinator now for head coach. And that, to me, was kind of a clue that, okay, well, why would New York not be on the list in that case? Or why would a place like Miami not be on the list? Because they had a great season. They really seem like they are a quarterback away from being extremely competitive in the AFC. So why not Miami? Or why not a team like the Washington football team, who Russell Wilson went to high school just down the road in Richmond? And you look at Coach Ron Rivera, respected head coach, and you put a quarterback on that team, and you could easily win the NFC East and be competitive. And so why not some of those teams? And when I started to look at that, New York Giants, another one of those examples, all of those teams either have a former special teams coordinator or they have a former defensive coordinator as head coach. And you look at the 4 teams that were listed, and they all have offensive coordinators. And not only do they have offensive coordinators, the offensive-minded head coaches, they have coaches who have won the division or have taken a team and won playoff games. Now, Matt Nagy, he didn't win any playoff games with the Bears.
Uh-oh. Oh, you still there, Brandon? We got a little bit of a hiccup. Uh-oh. Russell Wilson's listening, going, we're going to sabotage the stream. Brandon, you still there? We got a little bit of a lockup on the signal there. All right. Wow, Brandon was just flying with this point there.
They play Rams.
There he is. There. Hey, Brandon, sorry. I lost you I lost you for like 10 seconds. Are you still with me? Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, all right. You just froze for like 10 seconds, and all of a sudden you were back. So I lost the last few seconds. You're talking about Matt Nagy, and then you froze up. So
okay.
So while you're since we had a little bit of a break, I do want to recognize there was a super chat that came in from Khan. Thank you for your support, Khan. He says, Brandon, how much truth is there to the story that Russ stormed out of a meeting? About the offense before the second Arizona game? Hawks had lost 3 of the last 4 at that point of the season. You think Pete lost faith? I guess we can have you answer that question there. Well, let's go ahead and answer that. That's kind of the next thing, because you didn't mention about that article.
How much credibility do I necessarily give to that report? Yeah. And I do. I've talked to Michael Sean Dugar. Mike Sando had his name on that piece too. I do think that anytime that we see something like that, and I know they must have had multiple sources that would have gone on the record to that, but I do wonder in terms of, when you talk about storming out of a room, just how other people would characterize that in terms of a report. So I do think that there's probably people that spoke to the reporters at the Athletic and said that happened. And I guess, and even if it did, I don't think that we could ever say that everything's, you go to any workplace that there's going to be disagreements from time to time. And that probably was a difficult point in the season with Russell Wilson having turned it over. Some of his biggest stretch of turnovers were in that portion of the season. So I give it credibility.
Yeah. But like you said, how big of a deal is that? I mean, I think the problem is the reason why it's such a big deal here is we're so used to Russell being like the ultimate foot soldier who's like always happy, never complains, always positive, always go Hawks. So the moment we even hear him having an opinion on something, we're like, Russell Wilson's not feeling right about this. Oh, what are we going to do? So there's this feeling like the Boy Scout suddenly he makes a stand on something and it's like, well, there must be something really wrong, and who knows? Maybe this
I have a hard time picturing it for sure because, and the way I see it in my mind is, just how I've maybe reacted in meetings in the past where, I get up out of a meeting and maybe the door slams behind me. It's like one of those heavy doors. And are they going to think that I was upset that the door slammed too hard? And then people start to, make stories off of that. I don't know. I think that there was probably, it was probably heated in some way because we do see that as a very strong turning point in the season to where things started to go south in terms of the way Russell Wilson played. And they didn't necessarily, I don't think they really approached it offensively too much differently. We just saw more hesitation from Russ at making those deep downfield throws to where he would drop back in the pocket and, he would look like he's just about to release it. And then, he would have that slight hesitation and wouldn't throw some of those deep shots that we were so used to seeing earlier on in the season.
Which resulted in a lot of these sacks that piled up near the middle to end of the season as well, right?
And so that's another reason why I do tend to give that report some credibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not going to say I don't think it happened, but again, given what was going on at the time, it's probably understandable. And but yeah, so then it takes us again back to where we are now, and I'm still pushing you for that eventual answer and opinion from you. Is how worried, how real is this? If you had to put money down or gun to the head, someone saying, "Look, Brandan, I just need to know, is Russell Wilson going to be playing football for the Seahawks in 2021? Or, is he good for 21? Is he gone? Because I've got one of the guys who's a regular on my show, Coach Bill Marsh. I've got him on the record. He is saying, and he's adamant, that Russell Wilson will be here for 2021, but as soon as that season's over, in less than a year's time, he is going to be heading out someplace else. And he's sticking with it. I said, are you sticking? That absolutely doesn't matter if we win. Doesn't matter if we win a Super Bowl. Doesn't matter if we suddenly are just heading this direction and the offense is clicking and he's cooking. You're saying no matter what, he has planted the season, he's going to be gone. He's saying yes, absolutely. So I want to get from you, your take. Is Russell Wilson going to be gone after this season, or when will he be gone, or is he here to stay? I guess that's really it. Is he gone immediately, gone really soon, or is he here to stay as a Seattle Seahawk? And before you answer that, I got to just quickly recognize Jason E. in the Super Chat. Seems like Aaron Rodgers, when he was unhappy, that's the whole two guys, two of the top highest paid quarterbacks, being unhappy with the situation is not a stranger to Aaron Rodgers. So back to my question. Yeah. What is it, Brandan, in your opinion?
Well, speaking to Aaron Rodgers, man, I've been calling for maybe just a little bit more fire from Russell Wilson. Like I would like to see that from him to start motivating guys around him too. But to answer your question, to really get to it, is that I think as long as Pete Carroll and John Schneider really like their jobs with the Seattle Seahawks, I think they will keep Russell Wilson in Seattle. And so they have no motivation to trade Russ at this point, and really not next year either, or the year after that. So why would you do that and move on unless you have a really solid idea of where you're going to go next? And I know I hear a lot of people pointing back to the fact that, they were looking at Patrick Mahomes. They were looking at Josh Allen. Yeah, that's what a general manager does, is he looks at other quarterbacks who could potentially make the team better in case somebody does come to them with some ridiculous type of offer and say, we're going to give this to you. It's going to be, franchise changing. That just, you'd be silly not to listen to and perhaps make a move on. So I think, and just like the reports that we heard today, Norb, is that, the Seahawks are actually returning calls from teams that call him about a potential trade for Russell Wilson. Okay, great. Yeah, they're calling him and leaving a message, asking him to call him back, and they're returning the calls. That seems like what normal people do in that particular general manager position. So I don't think he's going anywhere in 2021. Now, if things continue to go sour and things really start to, I'm trying to think of where this relationship would have to be after the season to actually make a move. I think that both sides would really have to see that they aren't going anywhere in terms of playoffs in the future with one another. So if it comes to that, I just think, Norb, there's so much stuff that can happen here in this next season that we don't know that's going to provide that information for 2022 and beyond. But 2021, I don't think any team could come up with a realistic trade package that would make me say yes to move on from Russ.
All right, so you're basically saying he's at least here for the next season. You're putting that much down, that he's not going anywhere, at least not until after 2021. Minimum. He's not going anywhere for this season. So,
and I don't even know if I could. It's so unlikely. Like, I think all we have to do is look at the Deshaun Watson situation down in Houston. Here's a quarterback who says, I am not coming back to this organization. And the organization is still saying, we don't want to trade him. We want to keep him. Right. And we went out and got a coach, and we have the whole new general manager, and things are changing here, and we want to keep Deshaun. So that's the position that most organizations are going to take. And it just the Seahawks organization just does things a little bit differently in that they never shoot down any types of trade rumors. We saw it with Richard Sherman. We saw it with Earl Thomas. And then in those situations where, it comes around where you can get a couple first round picks for Frank Clark, and you don't know if you're going to make it work under the cap with Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson. And okay, you let Frank Clark go to the Chiefs for a couple first round picks. So I do think that there is benefit into keeping those channels open and just not shutting everything down.
And I agree. And I think it's funny that people make news stories out of the fact that phone calls and inquiries are being made. It's like, I'm a married man, right? And they say, well, they're looking at the quarterback. Well, it's like, well, guys will look. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go leave and go marry and hook up with that other woman, or just because someone calls you doesn't mean, I guess I must be interested. It's like the phones are just ringing because there's going to be inquiries, of course, especially when there's stories like this floating around out there. But
I don't like the married, the marriage type situation. It doesn't correlate to me with this, because
this is true. This is not a marriage. Yeah. It's a bad analogy.
There is a commitment in terms of a contract, but that's as far as it goes.
But there's a working relationship in which you have two entities coming together, and you're hoping that by together you're actually better moving forward than you are apart. And I still believe that they're better together than apart. And what's funny about they compared to Deshaun Watson to Russell Wilson, Houston was terrible this year. Seattle won the division, made the playoffs, and we're 12-4. Yeah, they lost badly in the first round exit, but it wasn't like we had this horrible, terrible losing season where it was like, oh my gosh, this team is just, we got to do something about this because this is on the falling apart. It's like only in Seattle would we have these types of issues with a team that's actually performing at such a great level. That's just about as good as you could have, other than the fact that they didn't win that playoff game. So here, on the flip side to it, you said the Seahawks wouldn't be motivated, but what if Russell Wilson, in his mind, really doesn't want to be here? Let's say he really made up his mind, I don't want to be here, and Carroll and Schneider want to keep him here, but Russell wants out, like the Deshaun Watson angle from the quarterback standpoint. Well, if he really didn't want to keep playing here, and that's really the debate, is what does Russell Wilson really want? If he really wants out, he could ultimately force the hand by saying, look, I'm miserable here. I don't want to play here anymore. You got to trade me. Theoretically, that could happen, and that could happen before 2021, right? Theoretically, if Russell Wilson really wants out of here, he could force the issue.
Yeah, I think you would have to see him do something similar to Deshaun Watson, and we haven't heard anything like that yet. Even in the tweet where the 4 teams were named, right, it was Russ wants to stay in Seattle, but here's 4 teams. Now, it is kind of weird that you would do it that way, but that is what came out ultimately, through Adam Schefter and Russell Wilson's agent. So I do think that we need to pay attention to that, but we also needed to pay attention to the fact that he said that he wants to stay in Seattle. And so until that changes, then you just have to assume that, yes, he wants to stay in Seattle. And yeah, the general managers can have all these discussions in the offseason, and that's fine. And so I think that that's really the best option moving forward until you get to the point to where he's saying he wants out. And even then, I think you would maybe even push it to where you would see Dwayne Brown is a good example, right? In Houston, where he said, I am not coming back. I'm not playing for this team anymore. I do not like the owner or the organization. I want out. And he actually sat out games. He sat out until he had to ultimately report or, risk having his contract go over until the next season. So I think with the amount of money that a guy like Russ would make, until he's sitting out football games, and so we'll see that if that happens even with Deshaun Watson, that really until it gets to that point. Now, if you do wait until that point, then the trade packages probably aren't going to be as good. But really, I don't even know where a trade package would start for a franchise level quarterback who is in the top 5, and that goes for both Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson. Guys who are top 5 quarterbacks, where does a trade compensation package even start? Because we've never seen that. It would be unprecedented the next time it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to at least 3 first-rounders, a player of some caliber, and who even has that to give away, right? So it's like I said, it's
when you're talking 3 first-rounders with that report that came out from Mike Silver, that makes sense to me in terms of, okay, that's where the conversation is going to start. Like, that has to be the starting point, but we don't even know if we're talking, one of those. To me, if I'm a general manager and that's the starting point, it either has to be a top 5 pick in the first round because I have to be able to identify and go after my next quarterback, or I have to get a quarterback that I know that I can win with as part of the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I have and always will be until it's told otherwise. I love Russell Wilson as our quarterback. I have always seen him being the guy to play his whole career here and retire here. I'm sticking with that until Russell himself says he's not going to be doing it. Is that how you feel? Do you feel that same way about Russell Wilson?
I do. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me to move on from him as an organization, a guy who to this point has pretty much taken down all of the Seahawks franchise records, and he's still only 32. So even if he only has 6 years left in him, it's something I see the Seahawks being able to win with him at quarterback over the next six years. So with the number of years that he has on contract, with the ability to franchise tag him after that contract, I don't see any reason why the Seahawks, unless something happens that you would say these two these two sides can't work together, that I would be willing to accept that either side needs to move on.
Jason E. in the Super Chat says, Russ was a game manager early in his career, but we had Pete's defense and a worst O-line. Maybe it's his last year. Let him try another team. Well, I beg to differ with you, man, Jason E.
I get a sense though, what Jason is trying to say, though. Like, I would like to see him experience that just so he could see how maybe the grass isn't always greener.
Yeah. It's easy to look at the Tom Brady situation and go, I want that. I want what he had.
I want to do that.
What quarterback wouldn't want what Tom Brady has had, right? He's had the perfect decade and a half worth of everything you'd want, almost 2 decades worth. No quarterback would say no to that, but not like you can just get that like that. He had a perfect situation working for him. I know you got to go soon. Brandan Schulze of the Seahawks podcast is my guest. He's got just only maybe a minute or two left. Last question. It's all been about Russell Wilson, but what is your number one? We're about to jump into the whole free agency big time here. Who is the number one free agent, in your opinion, that the Seahawks need to keep? Who's the number one priority for Seattle? You can name a couple, but what are your priority free agents of names that could potentially leave? Who has to stay, in your opinion?
Ooh, of the ones who could leave for the Seahawks, I think the guy that you have to keep if you're Seattle is KJ Wright, because he had such an outstanding season last year. And he's a guy, that's playing right up on the line. And man, I just like that core of KJ, Bobby, and Jordan Brooks as the linebackers. I think for me, the leadership that he brings, the ability that he has, he's really turned my mind around, because I was one of those guys saying, well, he's getting up there in age. Can he really continue to do it? But then we just saw this week, Thomas Davis retired from Washington, and he played most of his career with the Carolina Panthers. And Norb, if you think back to when Thomas Davis came into the league, he came in the same year as Lofa Tatupu.
That's crazy. He's so old, man.
It's wild for a linebacker. So I think that maybe you have to consider that KJ is going to be able to do this for a few more years. And based off of what we've seen from him the last 2 seasons, he doesn't look like he's slowing down.
No, he's. We did a film breakdown of him just a couple days ago, and KJ actually himself tweeted out, said, "Hey, great film study." I was like, "Hey, KJ responded." So yeah, I'm with you on KJ. Last one, Shaquille Griffin, stay or go? What do you think?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think he's going to be the one that would have to go, because he's just going to, in terms of free agency, I think there's going to be a team out there that's going to offer him a big payday. And one of the things that we've seen from Pete Carroll is he's generally able to find guys, and John Schneider able to find guys like DJ Reed. They were able to pick him up off of waivers and get him to come in and be that guy opposite of Shaquille Griffin. So, can they find another guy like that in the offseason? Even if he's blowing up this idea that you have to be 6 foot whatever and have 32 plus inch arms to play outside corner for Pete Carroll, then, who knows? Maybe Ugo Amadi can be the other guy opposite DJ Reed. It doesn't take a Richard Sherman type physique to play outside corner for the Seahawks. So I think that they'll be able to find guys that can play corner, and you can use that money better spent elsewhere, like on the offensive line, helping out Russell Wilson. Yes. And if there's any truth to what Russell Wilson would like to have, well, I think we definitely got to prioritize some protection for Russell Wilson. Again, my guest is Brandan Schulze of the Seahawks podcast. You can find them at Seahawks Pod on Twitter, also at the locker room at Seahawkra, and of the YouTube the link to their YouTube is in the description as well. Brandan, thanks for joining me, man. I know you got to get going, but is there anything else you want to say real quick before the show's up? Anything you want to quickly shout out or anything before I let you go? Yeah, just one more time, if people want to join in and do a live discussion about free agency, Clinton Bonner and I will be on the Locker Room app tomorrow, probably about 4 o'clock Pacific time. I'll have a link up at fieldgoals.com, people to check that out. And yeah, if you have an iOS device, get that Locker Room app and then join in the conversation with us here on Friday. On the real Friday, not today Friday. Yes, like I said at the beginning of the show, like the real Friday tomorrow. All right. And Jason, even the super chat, real quick, yes or no on this one. Carlos Dunlap, extension, or is he gone? Ooh, I would extend Carlos Dunlap. I would pay Carlos Dunlap at his current 1-year deal, which is $14 million, which is a lot, but based off his production last year. And I do think extension makes a lot of sense, especially with what we saw with J.J. Watt, because if you saw a 2-year deal for J.J. Watt where he's going to be a cap hit of $8 million for the Cardinals this next year. So if they can do even a similar type of deal, or even the exact same deal that J.J. Watt got with the Cardinals, then that would bring the Seahawks cap down. It would open up some of that space for free agents this year, and I think pay him a reasonable amount of money for the next couple of years.
I love it. Yeah. The impact wasn't Carlos Dunlap, not by himself, but he made other guys around him better as well. So I love that guy. I mean, instant impact, which is hard to find when you can just bring a guy in and bam, immediately the guys around you get better. Brandon Rogers for Brandan had one last question. How big of an impact do you think Russell had on the Waldron hire? How big of a say do you think Russell and Waldron will have on personnel?
I think Waldron will have a say in terms of personnel, because especially with the type of receivers that he'll want for his offense, so when it comes to that third wide receiver that I know Seahawks fans that we all want, when it comes to some of the offensive line personnel, whether or not the type of center and guard they go toward next, I think Shane Waldron will have an impact on that as well. So, and then if you go back to the Athletic article that we were talking about earlier, is that Russ did have some say in this Shane Waldron hire. So it does seem weird to me that he would want out after having input toward the type of offensive coordinator that he would want on the team. And depending on how that goes now, I think that's one of those information points, Norb, that we will look at when we start thinking about whether or not it could be, Russell Wilson continuing to stay in Seattle in 2022 and beyond.
All right. Well, Brandan, I know you got to go. Thank you for staying a few extra minutes to answer our viewers' questions. But again, my special guest, Brandan Schulze of the Seahawks podcast. Brandan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Norb.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. And everybody else, have a great evening. Go Hawks.